Team, what is up? Just wanted to say massive congratulations and welcome to all the guys that have joined onto the Bowhunters Challenge for January of this year. Already we're seeing some incredible results from those guys. A lot of them have already said, look, my energy is way better than what it ever was. A lot of them have reported way better sleep. A few of them are doing deadlifts for the first time in their lives, never done any form of exercise like that, or they've been doing them but doing them completely wrong, and seeing how much better it can be when you're actually coached and I guess realistically when you're learning how to do it properly rather than just going for it. And then we've also seen a fair chunk of them already dropping kilos of weight, which is awesome. We've seen one dude drop 2 kilos, one dude dropped 1.5, another guy dropped 1 kilo, one other guy dropped 1.5 kilos as well. So, I mean, realistically, it just shows that my shit works, and I know it does. But, of course, you guys are actually always welcome to join the Bowhunters Challenge. You can just go to www.bowhunterschallenge.com if you'd like to get involved with the program that is designed for you as a bowhunter to become a better bowhunter, but also a better individual, better human for yourself and for your loved ones. So if you're interested in that, it's www.bowhunterschallenge.com.
Hey there, and welcome to Becoming a Bowhunter. I'm your host, Matty, and join me and our guests as we take the quality of meat back into our own hands, searching the wild for free-ranged animals to harvest as ethically as we can. I interview a variety of specialists from the bow hunting community to help fast-track your journey as a bow hunter. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this chinwag on one of your favorite topics in the world, bow hunting.
Hey, bow hunters and friends, welcome back to another episode of Becoming a Bowhunter. This week I'm excited. We have Emily Corbett back for her round 2 episode with us, and pretty much we took off from where we left off the last podcast in a sense, and it's about the progression that Emily has kind of done since then, and a lot of it is about the recent Chital hunts that she's been on pretty much since we did the last podcast. A lot of her learnings from that, but also just about the recent success that she's actually had within the Chital hunting, which has been incredible to see it kind of all unfold. For anyone who's been following along on her social media, you'll be able to relate to that. But I think what's really cool is that Emily is just so raw. She just tells it how it is, and she's very honest about her whole journey, which is why it's exciting to also share it and follow along with it on her social media. So if you're not already, make sure you head across and follow her there. Outside of that, I hope you guys are having a great weekend. Hope you're getting pumped and ready for the upcoming rut, if you're getting out for that, and hopefully you're just getting out hunting in general. Awesome, guys. Enjoy.
Alrighty, guys. Welcome back to the podcast. Sitting here with Em Corbett. Em, welcome back.
Thank you, Matty. So good to be back.
It's funny. I think you're probably one of like the most reached out to podcast guests I've ever had on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like a lot of people kind of. It seems like a lot of people kind of got in touch with you after the podcast, saying thank you for being the bright, bubbly self, and I think showing your passion into bow hunting. I think a lot of people really appreciate that.
Yeah. No, I loved it. It was a very new experience for me, but yeah, I definitely had so many people reach out and just agree with a lot of things that I said, because, yeah, they sort of, last podcast we covered everything from day dot, from where I very, very started. And yeah, it was really cool. It was awesome to know that everyone else feels the same. You know?
Yeah, definitely. Do you still have your little bow hunting book?
I do. I do. It's funny though, but the more you do it, the less you write in it. And exactly. I looked at it the other day and I thought, man, there's so much shit I should be writing in this. But it's almost like one of those things that you hear it once and you're just like, okay, well, that's just a given from now on. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I wish I thought about it earlier this year, and I thought I need to be a little bit more,
I've got a few
write in
friends.
that a lot more.
I've got a few friends that actually document their hunts. Every time they go on a hunt, they'll write it down so they remember it. And it's just like a little journal entry type thing, just so they remember what kind of happened and when it happened and how it happened, which I think is really cool. I try to do, I guess, voice memos here and there, and I guess that's kind of what the podcast has been for me for journaling it to some extent. But yeah, I think writing it, or at least making that mental note of what went well and what didn't go so well, is really important.
Yeah, for sure. I think I sort of do a little bit through the Onyx Hunt app, just like being able to document the time of year that I was somewhere and the time of day that I was somewhere and what activity was happening and things like that. So that sort of helps me in a hunt situation. But yeah, just in terms of a few little technical things or just animal behavioral stuff, it's something that you see and you learn, but then it's like, oh, well, even just for the fact of the book, it should go in there. Like, it's not something I'll forget, but it should go in there.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love it. I think it's a great idea. And so you've just had a very successful hunt, but it didn't come without a lot of persistence and patience and, I should say a lot of testing of your patience, maybe is the best way to say it. And it almost feels like it's been a journey that's been ongoing ever since we actually last had our podcast. Like, you were kind of, I think from memory, and I haven't actually re-listened to that podcast, but I think from memory you're just chasing the pigs. Like, you hadn't really started with the deer very much at all. It was kind of like a new experience that you were just looking into going into. And you went pretty much straight to the hardest deer in Australia to go chasing, I believe. Maybe second hardest, I don't know, depending on who you talk to. Sambar or Chital, I think they're both right up there, right?
Yeah, actually, yeah. I've had that comment to me as well about Sambar being really hard. Yeah, so last time we spoke, it would have been sort of the first hunt that I ever had with Brad Smith was him taking me to his deer block and giving me the opportunity to sort of, I don't know, show him what I do and where I might do things wrong and things like that. So, yeah, since then I've had a few. I'm lucky enough to be on the road to and from Brad's deer block and also Cougar Adventures. So I get a lot of stop-ins from these guys, which is awesome. They've become my family a little bit. And so I've been lucky enough that if I've been working flat out or something like that and I haven't been able to get up to the Cape to see them, that I'd stopped in and been like, oh, I'm going on a meat run. I've got to get more venison to send back up to Cougar Adventures. Do you want to come? And I've just been like, yeah. So there's been a few trips in between there that, yeah, it's been Chital deer, and I've hunted fallow once when I was a baby bow hunter. It was very different, but very clueless back then. So having a bit more of an idea and a bit more of an understanding, you do start to realize how difficult Chital are. But it really does, like, now that I've learnt some shit, it really does depend on the situation, like the season and what's going on, because you can turn up at a deer property and it'd be the situation where, like I had just recently had, where they're mobbed up and there's a billion eyes and there aren't stags moving solo on their own or anything like that. So it's difficult, and there's not much wind or whatever. Or you can turn up and, there'll be satellite stags moving around and it's windy and you can make moves and make approaches and stuff and you get a lot more opportunities. So, yeah, it just depends. But I think since my very first, I've known Brad now for 8 months since that very first hunt that I had on that block. And yeah, I think that hunt that I just had was my 5th hunt on that block. Yeah. And I'd shot a stag on my last hunt there. But he was just a little bit, like, there was nothing wrong with him. Beautiful meat if we had have got to it in time, but sort of what happened, I don't know, he wasn't a casting, like he was a full-grown stag, but he just had these little munted little stubs of antlers. Yeah. So he wasn't exactly a casting because they were hard, and yeah.
What's Brad's
good,
kind of?
But it was.
What's Brad's concept on that? Like, did he kind of explain why he thought that might have happened?
Or it could, yeah. So it could be sort of either a genetic thing or it could be as a result of an injury. And you'll see that a fair bit with antlers, whether it's sort of like one side looks normal and one side looks a bit retarded or whatever. It can be, I think it could be both. It can be genetics or it could be that they've had an injury on that side and something's just a bit skewiff.
Yeah,
and sometimes after another shed, they'll come back again normal.
Yes,
or
I used to
sometimes
always
they
think
won't.
that the Mong head just meant that it was bad genetics, but then found out this year that that's not the case. It is generally because they have had an injury. If it's like kind of really skew, if like you're talking about like really monged off to the side or something like that. So I really found that quite interesting. I always just thought that was a shitty genetic deer.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, it's pretty cool that that's replicated through that on their head, really. So, yeah. So I don't really know, and I don't know. Brad didn't have too much comment on how it was. Just these two little hard nubs on the top, but it was an opportunity which I'm not gonna lie. I've had hundreds of opportunities, but it's still just that moment where you're like, okay, I could, but it's just not quite. You know, like. I don't know, you get to that moment where you're like, I always sort of think that depends what you define as an opportunity. You know, like if there's an animal within your shooting range, that could be an opportunity. But in terms of Chital deer, the way that I look at it is like you've got an opportunity on Chital if you're fully drawn back, because once you're fully drawn back, there's still a 50% chance that so much could go wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and so much has to go right to get from the point of being drawn back and to the point where you're happy to shot. So, yeah. So I've had, in terms of opportunities, I've had hundreds. But yeah, when that little casty or whatever stag come walking down, I took the shot and I thought it was good. It felt good, and then when I saw the arrow was fully blooded. It was snapped off, but there was a lot of blood on it. And I was excited, but I remember Brad saying, like, don't get excited yet. Like, you don't. And it's true, like, especially in terms of, you know, you haven't succeeded until you've got your hands on that animal, you know, like, and they are tough. Like, you don't realize how tough critters are, you know, like what they go through in the natural environment and what they live through and what they keep battling through. You know, you think you've done a good job or whatnot, but yeah, they're pretty tough. They live through a lot. So, yeah, it was as usual. All the action always happens just on dark or whatnot. And so sun was fading and like light was fading really fast, and we walked around and I was so determined. I was like, I am gonna pace this section of the bush out as much as I can until I really have to go home. I was determined to find him, and I couldn't find him. I was devastated when we got back. Like, in terms of emotions, you know, you go through the emotions of the fact that you've just taken a shot at an animal, and then you go through the emotions of the fact that you haven't found it, and then you go through the emotions when you go back. It's like, am I going to find it tomorrow, or what could I have done different? And again, which we discussed on our last podcast, is the benefit of having Brad with me in terms of filming it, because you rewatch that video a billion times being like, I don't know, didn't it, whatever.
So what was the outcome on that? What was
anyway,
the
we
looking
went back
at
in the
video?
morning. Yeah, well, the shot looked good. The shot looked good, and it was just like, well,
Like a lung shot, heart shot? What are you thinking?
No. Oh, I'm pretty sure, like, it was a bit, because it was so late in the day, the lighting was terrible. So we were just trying to, like, literally, we slowed it down to, like, frame by frame by frame, trying to picture pick where my arrow's hitting and stuff. And it was just dark, and it was literally just, it was like, well, yeah, don't know. We'll just see. We'll just have to go back in the morning.
Just within the kill zone.
Yeah. Well, and the arrow looked good. Like, the arrow was full of blood and whatnot. So, yeah. And looking back, like, we talk about it now, and looking back, we probably should have got torches, and we probably should have just kept going back out there and looking for it. But it's a catch-22, because if you haven't quite done the job and you push that animal, then there's that chance of it taking off and you really never find it again.
Yeah.
Or you leave it that little bit longer and, you know, it's there in the morning because you've left it to die, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got back in the morning, and I just like headed off, and I was zigzagging through this area that I was sure it was by this in the river. And I remember Brad calling me back and being like, "Hey, Em, like I've got his
Has stopped. Stop. Sorry, don't worry about that. You're good.
Oh,
I just stopped the video recording because it was slowing down heaps.
Okay. Yeah, so I was back and forth along the river, like where I assumed he would be. And the night before, we followed footsteps only so far, and then it was real leafy and hard to track. So I remember Brad being like, "Oh, hey, Em, like I've got his last footprints here." And I was standing back down the gully. I was like, "All right, well, which direction do I need to go?" You know? And he was like, "No, just come back here and check these out." And I was like, "Right." I walked back up the hill, and I'm looking at the footprints, and I was like, "Yep, okay, right. So they've gone this way." He's like, "Yeah, I don't reckon he's gone real far." And I was like, "Yeah, well, how far do you reckon?" He's like, "Oh, I don't know, like 5 meters." And I like looked at him, and then I looked up, and he was just bedded down by this tree. So it was, I'm pretty sure it was a long shot.
Yeah.
But he'd gone 100 meters from where I shot him, but
No
it was
way.
just dark.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I reckon that night I would have walked straight past him. Like there was no struggle, there was no nothing. And I was devastated because, and then that's another whole lot of emotions because you're like, damn it, if I had just seen him, we could have harvested the meat. Everything could have been done that night in that moment, but it's the delayed thing. And
so you'd walk past that creek
from him
bed, like
sitting
in the
there,
night?
there was a billion times.
Yeah,
a billion times. And it's, you know, you think that they're spotty and that they stand out, but
they don't, no.
Man, they don't. They're still so camouflaged. It really shits you. But yeah, so that next morning it was a bit like it was a relief, but it was also a sad moment. Yeah, bittersweet. Whereas it was a bit like, oh, and we did lose like the pretty sure it was the front legs, I think, just because being close to the heart and a few of those arteries and stuff, it was had a bit of a smelly taint smell, but took the back legs, I'm pretty sure, and the back straps and the hide and all the rest of it. And we cut up the back straps that night and they were beautiful. So that was really lucky.
Yeah.
And so since then I've had a few other hunts, like where we've gone down for meat deer and things like that, where I've again had another heap of opportunities, but just shy of what I describe as the moment, you know. And then I was lucky enough that
so before we go too far,
it ended up happening.
Before we go all that way, I want to go back to the to this stag when you put him down.
Me up anytime.
Yeah, before you went to this, like when you got to the stag, and obviously you said the meat kind of smelt tainted. Is that the only real thing that you went off of?
There was like this, color. So it was almost, I don't know, it wasn't anything from the gut, but there was just this fluid that, you know, I guess starts to seep out of the body. Like when anyone dies, anything dies, and he wasn't bloated, but it was just things start to seep out.
Yeah.
And it just had a bit of fluid with it, and it just stank, and it just was like, you know, you cut that piece of meat off, and then you smelled it, and it had a bit of that fluid on it, and it was just like, not really worth it, you know. Whereas definitely. Like the back straps and then those other legs that were down where it wasn't so hot, because the guts and the organs and everything generated a fair bit of heat for a while.
Yeah.
While it was bedded down, that I think the back legs didn't quite have that much of effect, and it was still summer, or it was still warm. It's still North Queensland, so it was still warm, but there was just the back legs were very, very different to the front.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, we can move on then. It's good to know that it was like in the middle of Queensland too, when it's nice and hot. Like, it's hard to know what you can actually save and how much longer you can save it for. So what was that shot like? You shot right on dark, and then you would have got out as early as you could. So what are you talking, like 12, 15 sort of hours?
Well, it would have been right on dark was probably like about 7 o'clock maybe. And then I don't think we even got out of there until even 9 or 8:39 or something. And Brad just sort of pulled back and was like, look, I think we should leave it. He's even in a different vicinity, just a little bit wider. Don't want to push it because it's a catch-22. I asked him about it, obviously, and he was like, well, it's catch-22. You either go out there and you try to find it and it's there and it's praise the Lord type thing, or you find it and it's maybe been one lung or something like that, and it was just bunkering down for the night to potentially be there in the morning.
Yeah.
And if you go hunting around for it and it boosts it, then it's even hard. Like, they run very far on adrenaline. So, yeah. But, yeah, it was probably about 10 hours, 10, 12 hours, something like that, yeah?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Or actually, probably even less because we got up real early. It was like break a day that we were out there. So, yeah.
So it's like 4:30. So really it's like 8 hours. Maybe a bit more. Yeah, okay, cool. And so in between, you obviously had a few more hunts where you went out there. Was the goal always to get a stag down? Like, that's always pretty much what you're hunting for?
Initially not. Like, initially I was just stoked to just, and I still am, like, even this trip that I just had, anything, like a doe, just any meat animal is all that I really care about. Like, if all that I really care about is the fact that I can take a meat animal with my bow, take it home, put it in the freezer, feed my dog, feed my family, feed my friends, whatever.
Yeah.
That's all that I really care about. I wasn't even, yes, it's always been in the goals to get a stag and be up there with the Chital stag type thing, but I hadn't, like, besides that other little casty thing that I had shot, like, that was cool, but it felt to me like it wasn't quite as successful as I wanted it to be just because we lost part of that animal.
Yeah,
do you know
definitely.
what I mean? So, again, and in hunts between, there was does, stags, wouldn't matter. I was ready to take that shot.
Yeah. And so was this the rut then, essentially, for them when you went up?
I think this is a time where they're fairly active. I spoke to James Doomstis about it, and he said that this was sort of like his favourite time to hunt Chital, whereas they're a bit more active. Whereas on this block in particular, Chital are difficult because they sort of go all year round. Like, they're not as specific as something like fallow, something where it's April, it's bang on, that's when it's happening, whatever. Whereas, like, you turn up at this block, you've got deer that are rutting, deer that are just, you know, still in velvet or whatever. It's all a bit all over the place. So you just sort of go with what's around. It's a cracking block, actually.
And so are they calling and doing bits and pieces like that, or not very vocal?
Yeah. I've been there all year round, and they've been doing that. Whereas I don't know whether it's just the area that they're in, or might be different in other areas that they rut and they call and they do things a little bit more like predominant in some different months of the year. But I've been onto this block pretty much throughout the whole of the seasons, and there's only been one time that I was there and I thought, oh, geez, I'm not hearing much. I can't actually remember what month that was, but yeah, it just depends. Like, it's like with all animals, whether it's just recently rained, if it hasn't rained for a long time, how much feed is there, whatever. And with this block, it's also could potentially come down to how heavily they've stocked it with cattle as well, with how much feed is available, and that I'm sure that would affect.
Definitely.
You know.
It's pretty interesting. Like, whenever I go out hunting reds, like during the rut, you hear them all day long. Like, they're crazy how loud they are. Well, not even all day long, but it's just crazy how loud they are. Then the rest of the year, they're literally completely silent unless they honk at you.
Quiet.
Yeah, I know. And so it's really frustrating because you're like, all I want to hear, or all I want to know is where they are roughly. So just that locating is the hardest thing. So it would be cool to kind of have that constant little echoes and bits and pieces going on. I actually went and caught up with the crew that were going up the week after you, and they were telling me about the block that you were on and just how amazing it actually is. Like, pretty much how you can see them from the balcony of the place you stay in, and you look out and they feed through in this one valley, like one gully, kind of just consistently, how consistent they actually are. But obviously that doesn't just make it easy hunting, unfortunately.
No.
Yep.
It's a actually, like I love it though, like you wake up in the morning and it might be still dark and you can hear a stag calling one way, or you can hear a stag calling another way, and that's sort of what sort of sets you. And there's like a given pattern that there's some things you go check out, but the fact that you wake up and you see them out, they're actually out in, I'm pretty sure it's a weaner paddock, and it's just there's not much cover, so they're just all out there and they're teased because you go, well, I've got absolutely no cover to be able to get from here to you, and I hope you have a lovely day, but I'm going to go this way. Where you can actually make a play at something. But yeah, I call them, there's also rooster on that property, and there's always rooster hinds hanging around the drive in and the drive out, and I don't know, I just call them Wendy's. They just look like a Wendy. So every morning morning Wendy, and then like we drive out and then I'd be depressed or shattered or something or excited or whatever on the way back in. I'd be like, Wendy, and like give them a wave because they're just always there.
Brighten your day back up a bit.
Yeah, the population of deer is definitely high, but it certainly doesn't make it any easier. And I'm sure that crew, they were successful, like, and massive congratulations to them, but I'm sure they still work just as hard as anyone else to get those deer as you would any other property.
Yeah, it was long days, long days from what I saw and heard. So let's actually break down this one, the successful one that you had just recently, of your cracker stag. How did it all kind of play out? How was this day different to the others?
There was wind. Literally, that's like the main key thing that worked out.
Yeah.
Because
consistent wind, we should say.
Oh, like I had a week of next to no wind. Like it was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. Like Chital are hard anyway, but when you haven't got much wind at all, let alone consistent wind going one way, it makes it very difficult. But so it was as usual, a bit of a roller coaster week. It was my birthday week, and I invited, Matty and Dan were going to be there from Toga Adventures and Toga Broadheads, and we got Tommy Kilo to come over, and then Brad was on his way back up from New South Wales, so we haven't decided yet whether it was Brad or Tommy that gave us the Rona.
I was going to say, who was the spreader?
It was the person. Brad was pretty funny. Like he'd taken 2 rapid tests, but he turned up and he had a bit of a cough, and I'd isolated since New Year so that I knew for sure that I wasn't going to be the person that did that.
Yeah.
But it didn't really worry us. Like it's just, we literally just had the flu. Like it's funny, it hit us all fairly different. Brad just had a little cough the whole way through. I went through the flu symptoms. Matty and Tommy had fevers and things like that, but hit us all different. But yeah, like when you've got the flu and you've also got a whole week of hunting, you don't let the flu really get in the way.
Exactly.
So
I was going to say, it's probably the best way to spend some form of isolation, right? Like of all of the people who have gone through Corona and sat in their little units and just like piss farted around, done nothing, and you're out hunting. It's like so amazing.
Yeah, if I was going to get it anywhere, I'm pretty thankful that I got it there.
Yeah, 100%.
Not to mention it also gave me an extra week there, so that was a bonus. So yeah, I think I was probably like 3 days in. It was probably a Wednesday that I got it, that I started to come down. I had bad headaches and body aches and whatnot. But yeah, there wasn't a day that I missed hunting, but there was like probably 2 days there that I probably got up a little bit later, and I just waited until that whatever wind we had picked up. But it was another week of almost is what I like to call it. Is the feed was, because we've had a really good season up here, we had very high grass. There was still a fair bit of water everywhere, which, as most animals, scatters everything everywhere. I've hunted that block before where it's been dry and there's a given pattern where they move from the river up onto the flat, back from the flat down the river, so you can sort of set yourself up for a bit more of an ambush, or it'll be a time where there's figs that are right on and that's a food source, so you can just sort of set yourself up to be around or more. It's a little bit not really guaranteed to get anything, but you're just guaranteed to be able to see something
more consistent
so.
with their patterns,
But,
right?
yeah, so this trip, yeah, like you can sort of plan your day a little bit more. Like the mornings, you know that they're feeding from here to there, so you'll go there, and then the afternoons, you know that they're walking back out of the river onto the flat to feed at night, so you can set up for that. But yeah, this trip, there was feed everywhere, there was water everywhere, and they were mobbed up. So there was like mob of minimum 40 sometimes,
Jesus.
you know, or like if you pushed a smaller mob, they'd mob up onto the next mob, and then they'd keep moving. And like I at one point during the week, we found a bachelor mob of stags, and there seems to always be at least one or two grooms in there that are, you know, hard antlered and whatnot. And yeah, we'd like just try to game of cat and mouse, really. Like they still seem to always be on the move, and it was just trying to find that cover and keep going after and waiting for them to pull up. And it just seemed like every time that they got ahead of us and we'd have to wait until we could get to the next cover, they'd just rally up a few more protesters. It was just like kept building and building until we got to a ridge where it was like, all right, here we go. And then you like peek over the ridge and there's like 60 deer there. And you're like, oh, shit.
It's incredible.
How am I going to do this? How am I going to crawl around here and not one of them see me, you know? So, yeah, it's challenging, definitely challenging.
How close are they? Like when you pop over the ridge, how close are they?
Just stupid things, how they have, they were 40. Yeah,
okay.
A lot of the time during the week, the closest I would ever get, I think I was like day 4 or day 3 or day 4. And, you know, I'm pretty out, like, share the story on everyone's following on fairly closely as to what's happening. And it's like, what's going on, Em? And I'm like, mate, it's day 3 or day 4, and I still haven't even caught me. Like, there's many eyes, or there's not enough wind, or it's predictable wind where you finally, it almost feels like you finally get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm here, anything could happen. They could get up, they could walk this way, or, you know, I just need that one to bed down and then I can make another 10. And then you make another 10 and then it's like all of a sudden, they just get up and start moving. And you're just like, what the hell? How do they know that I'm just here?
Yeah, the joys of bow hunting. You about to run out of battery?
Yeah. I just, hang on one sec, Matty. I don't know why, because I'm plugged in. Just let me just check it.
Oh, yeah, all good. All right, we're back. A few little technical difficulties going on there. The audio has been a little bit dodgy, as you guys may have noticed. So what we've done is just change platforms that we're talking on. So hopefully this makes it a heck of a lot easier for us to actually be able to talk to each other. So where were we up to, Em? You were walking around through the bush and there was lots of wind, which has made it a lot nicer.
I was walking around the bush and there was a lot of eyes. Yeah. So, so the week went on and the wind started to pick up, and I think it was the day before I shot my stag that Matty and Dan were hunting separately, and I went with Brad, and we got the text saying, like, you know, where are you? We're back at the car. Do you want us to pick you up? Do you want us to leave you? We'll go find something else type thing. And we got a text from Matty saying, oh, Danny shot her first stag. So we all went down there and watched that go down. And, yeah, it was beautiful, actually. She was very emotional. She's come from a non-hunter background. And, yeah, I've sort of said it a bit before that she's a good example of I was blind, but now I see once you actually start hunting, in terms of understanding and realizing how it all feels when you do take an animal for meat and appreciating that and all that sort of thing. So we all appreciate that together. And then, so that was Danny's first ever deer hunt, or first ever Chital hunt, since she's got her bow at the end of last year. And
amazing.
it was incredible. And I, like, not going to lie, I was like, fuck, what am I doing wrong? Like, why can't we been trying for ages. This is bullshit. But I was so happy for her, but I was still,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like, it gets to the point where, and I know, like, I've spoken to Harry about this a bit, and there are, like, these people that have hunted them forever. You know, you realise that they're just so happy to call them in and so happy to see them and all that sort of thing, which I get. But if you are setting your heart so heavy on getting a stag or getting a deer down and it's been, 5 trips or whatnot, you start to really question yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
You still appreciate every moment for sure, but yeah, it gets to the point where
I guess at the end of the day, you're going out with a task, right? And when you don't complete a task, you feel incomplete, which makes a lot of sense.
A little bit.
And so it's understandable that, yes, when you come back empty-handed, time after time after time, like I go through this all the time. I'm always like, yes, I'm coming back with meat this weekend, and then it doesn't happen. You're like, fuck, what have I done wrong? Whereas it's just that it just didn't align that weekend, and that's just how it is.
Especially when you're coming home to a house full of people that look at you with this little gleaming face and they're like, did you do it? And you're like, nope.
Not again.
Sorry, I didn't. Now you have to deal with me sad. No. No.
I was going to say, can you go through what their process is up there for butchering? Like, do they bleed on the spot? Do they gut it on the spot? Do you cut it up on the spot, or do you just carry the whole deer out and then butcher it up when you get home? Like, how's their process work?
So it's very situational. Mm-hmm. So hopefully you've done a good shot and it's sort of bled out itself a bit by the time you get it. So really it's a sort of, like, if you get there and you don't feel like you've bled it out, which is, I've never had that situation where you haven't felt like it's bled out, but if you can bring a car to it, then we just sort of load the whole thing in a car and get it back to the cool room as soon as you can, and then, gut it out in the field, and then get the carcass back to a cool room. And then even if you sort of hang that for a couple of days or whatever until you're ready, it doesn't hurt, because for me it seems a bit easier to get that hide off once the animal's a bit cooler than in the moment. So when I shot that little casty stag, we just took the hide off it and then just cut the back straps and the limbs off and stuff, and then broke them down later. And then this time when I shot my stag, I wanted to keep the cape, because it was my very first stag with antlers and whatnot that I hope to keep forever. That we were still in a real swampy area and at a creek between us and stuff, between us and the car. So we just broke it down, gutted it, and then sort of literally cut it in half basically. And I carried the front half with the antlers and stuff out across the creek and into the car, and Brad just put the hindquarters in his pack and carried them out. So it just depends really what you want to do. If you don't want to keep the head and you want to keep the whole hide, then try to skin it and then wrap it up in the skin, wrap up the quarters of the animal in the skin, and then pack them out like that. Or if you've got meat bags and stuff like that, that all helps. But it just depends on what you want to do with the animal and your environment that you're in and how far you have to walk and things like that.
Yeah. And so are you planning on mounting your stag? Mm-hmm. You are going to mount your stag, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. Sorry.
Who's going to taxidermy it? I am not sure. I think a couple of the guys that Brad mentioned, I think they've sort of shut up shop. It might be a bit of a love job if I can get my stag done with them, but yeah, I'm not sure. He didn't have much faith in me. He sent it back with me up here. I said, why don't I leave it here and you can do it? He's like, what if you're singing along with your phone and you lose your license? You might need the money. So it's in the freezer downstairs, but I am absolutely determined to get it taxidermy. Doesn't matter what happens.
Yeah,
for sure.
Awesome. Sorry, you were about to say what happened with Danny's deer?
Oh, so Danny's stag, she just hoped to keep the hide. She wasn't going to keep the head or anything like that. So they just gutted it, and it was still close to the car. So gutted it, and Brad got on one end, Danny got on the other, and they just carried the whole animal to the cool room rather than split it in half.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's just interesting to see. I don't know how much you've been following along with any of the stuff I've been doing recently, but I've been going to Clark McGee's block. And the way he usually does it is that he, if he can, he just takes the whole animal back to the place and they string it up and then butcher it that way. And they just find that that's the easiest way to do it. And obviously that does work if you can get a vehicle to it. But most of the time, particularly when you're bow hunting, you're in the thickest of it all. And so getting a car to it is just not very easy to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm still very much interested in trying to find out. I've got some pH meters and stuff through my work and stuff. I'm still very interested to see how the meat, like measuring the pH level and determining meat quality and things like that, how that goes, because people sometimes do have to pack out for long distances and it can be a little while until that meat gets cold. So that's something cool.
I think I remember hearing a Meat Eater podcast, and they had a meat scientist on, and he was saying how much you can just change the texture of the meat based on field butchering an animal within 4 hours of it being killed. And it depends on the size of the animal too. Like the longer you can leave it, the better. So leaving the animal whole changes the flavor of the meat and the texture of the meat when you cut it up later, because of essentially the way that the blood drains out, the protein's kind of set and whatever else once it goes into rigor mortis.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty interesting stuff. Obviously, that's a lot of the stuff that goes on with beef, like making sure that it's killed and hung properly. But yeah, when you're out in the field, you just don't always have those options.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it can, I don't know, like I know one of my colleagues, he's like, oh, you don't want to eat that shit, Emily. It's never never been in the cool room quick enough and it's not, hung properly and tenderized and whatnot. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. It always tastes pretty good.
Yeah.
So it sort of goes against everything that I learned. But yeah, I'd be interested to see how it works.
It's funny. My auntie calls it peasant food whenever I eat deer in front of her. So I always try to make her something like really delicious for her to eat it. And she has said multiple times to me now, no, that's actually really good. Thank you for making it for me. She still doesn't go out and shoot it herself, but it's just nice to have achieved that, because previously she just called it peasant food. So it's nice for something different. All right. So leading on, Danny shot her deer and you're feeling a bit gutted. What happens?
So I rang my dad and told him all about it. And he was like, oh, how do you feel? And I was like, oh, I'm really happy for it for sure. Like, that's such an achievement. But I hope she realizes how much of an achievement it is, and I'm sure she did. She had tears streaming down her face, like everything was going on. She was feeling it, and it was amazing to see, actually. And I'm really thankful, because I've been hunting with Brad before and he's shot deer, and I don't know if you've hung out with Brad before, but he doesn't get real emotional about much. So you have to sort of beg him. I didn't go flat. Beg him to tell you the story about everything that all went down. And you're like, well, how did you feel? And he's like, yeah, good. And I'm like, no, but how did you really feel? We're very different people when it comes to that. So, the next morning, we went out and it was just almost after almost after almost, and then got on to another little bachelor mob, and there was a lot of crawling. I think I've done the most crawling this trip as I'd ever done, and just because that grass was high, and I think it maybe gave you a bit more opportunity. Like, you didn't necessarily have to have a tree behind you and a tree in front of you if you could, or just something behind you if you were knee deep in like on your knees in the grass and could just peek up over that, then that sort of worked. But so I crawled into this log, and I set myself a shot distance of 25 meters, and they just kept staying out off that. They were bedded up to start with, and I got to that point and I thought, all right, I'll wait here. If they get up and walk towards me, all I have to do is make 5 meters, and then they come within my shot range, and then something only has to walk another 3 or 5 or whatnot, and happy days. Anyway, they got up and all of them started walking off in the other directions, of course, as to where you want them to be. So then there was this not big, but there was a little creek in front of me, and it was half dried up, and it was just full of mud. And I sort of turned around, and Brad was like a fair way back filming me and taking photos and whatnot. And I looked at him, I was like, I think I'm just trying to like mime to him and talk to him with mouthing things. I was like, I think I need to get closer. I want to get to that tree type thing. And he's like, well, go across the river. Like, get your boots off and go across the river. And I was like, fuck that. I don't want to get that muddy. Like, that's so muddy. And I was like, fine. So I took my boots off. I even had snacks with me. Like, I was so prepared to just be sitting there because everything's been taking so long for anything to happen. Anyway, so I get my boots off and I crawl through this muddy creek, and I've just my feet are just so caked with mud, which was actually quite nice because it was really cushiony. And I was crawling, and I did bring my little knee pads for my Tusk camo pants, but I just always, every time, forgot to put them in. So this time again, I didn't have my freaking knee pads in. I'm crawling around on the ground again. Anyway, so I make another 5 meters, probably made about 8 meters. So I was in 25, I reckon.
Yeah.
I would have been if they had played the game right. And then they just sort of meandered around, came and went, and they just sat out. I reckon they would have sat out at 28. Oh. And I ranged, and I just thought I could push myself here. And this is where I sort of battle with myself a bit. Like, I could push myself. I could set my pin to 30. I don't often, like, I'll practice a little bit out to there, but for me, comfortably, I like to shoot 20 and under. Mm-hmm. That's my jam. 25 is my max. Like, 25 is me pushing it, you know. And then just because I think, what can I do to make that extra 5 yards?
Yeah.
You know, and like, if I'm a good hunter, I can, and if the opportunity is there to be able to close the gap a little bit, depending on cover and things, then I should. I shouldn't just take it from here. I should try my best to get in there and take that closer shot where there's a lot of less chance of things to go wrong. So yeah, I was there at 28, and I was thinking, should I dial in and set my pin at 30 and just go for this? And then there was another stag got up, and he seemed a bit closer, and I thought, okay, he'll walk in for sure. And I drew back. And I drew back twice on this young stag. He wasn't anything amazing, but like I said, I was just keen to get a meat animal on the ground. And he just never quite came in. I drew down, and then they moved off, and I crawled back in, and there was just no wind, and the birds started carrying on, and the opportunity had gone. And that was where I probably found myself the most. Like, I come back, and Brad sort of acknowledged, like, yeah, that was pretty tough. Like, you sort of did all you could do, Em. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, like, maybe I should have just, you know, put my pin on 30 and shot him. And he's like, or maybe you shouldn't have, you know, because you obviously didn't feel that was the right thing to do. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done it. If it had felt the right thing to do, yeah. But, you know, I've spoken to new bow hunters before, and they're like, oh, you know, he was at 40 and I should have just shot him at 40. And I'm like, no, you shouldn't have, because you didn't. You know, like, there's always that something that goes, nah, like, I'm not going to do it. But then always when you reflect, and there's been times where I've been frustrated as hell, and I'm like, if I just, you know, let it go and set an arrow out there, like, maybe I would have got him, but it's a maybe, you know. And once you actually start putting arrows in the air, you've got a lot of guilt and a lot of responsibility on that arrow, and it's just not something that I wanted hanging over my head, really.
Definitely. That hindsight after going through an experience like that is always, but it could have gone so well. You know, I don't think you really go through the process of, well, what could have gone bad and why did I actually not go for that shot?
Absolutely. And you go through that process of thinking, like, fuck, I should have done that. But then you're like, no, I didn't do that because of these reasons. And when it actually does go down, as it did later, for the reasons that are core values of yours, then it feels so much sweeter.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
If you had to risk it, there's every chance that there's a chance that it could have worked, but there's every chance that it didn't work, and it's weighing up how you really want to feel about it. You know.
Yeah.
So sort of had that conversation with Brad, and he was just like, no, you did everything you could, whatever. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know, like, what do we do? Like, we keep walking up this creek, because before we walked in there, we knew that there was deer sort of scattered for the first time. This is what I mean. It was a bit windy, and there was deer scattered for the first time in a while. So almost like in little mobs or singularly up along the creek. So he said, well, get your pack, we're going to keep going. I thought, yeah, Prado, get my pack, keep going, Emily, keep going, Emily, keep going, Emily. And this was like days that I'd actually, thank God, gone and got a COVID test and tested positive, and I had an excuse from my boss that I had to keep staying at deer camp. So I was on overtime here. And so the later in the day, got a little bit later in the day, so the wind picked up a bit more. And we were walking towards this mob of deer that were in some fallen trees. And so we had a plan there. And then Gandalf behind me with the extra height was like, oh, hang on a minute, I think I see some antlers. And I was like sort of looking dead straight through the the grass, and I was like, where? And he was like, oh, get on your tiptoes or something and have a look. And yeah, so then I found some of these tips of these antlers. He was like, I think he's a pretty good stag. And I was like, righto, well, new target, and we were in this creek, so we had a fair bit of tree cover around us, and the wind was good. The wind, honestly, was the best it had been since I'd got there. And it was only picking up, like it was just getting stronger in one direction.
Isn't that the nicest feeling when you're hunting? Like just a constant breeze in your face. You're like, thank fuck.
It's crazy because I'd had so many hunts that week before where it's been good. It's been light, but it's been good in your favor. And then you just get to that moment where you're like, okay, this is where it's about to happen. And it just swirls or it does nothing and it just all disappears. Everything that you thought could happen, gone.
I know that feeling too well.
I'm sure everyone does. So then it was like, all right, I've got to get from here to this tree crawling. And then I know roughly where he is. He's close to another tree that was a little bit further in front of me. And I was like, oh, I'll put my knee pads in. So for the first time all week, I opened my pack, put my knee pads in, and started crawling out. And I was pretty casual because I thought, well, this is how it is. And then deer started moving out of that fallen tree out onto the flat towards where this stag was, and a bit worried that they might stir him and get him to stand up before I'm in position. So I started rushing. So I was rushing, crawling out to this tree, and it was just a quick system. It was just like, get there, range that tree, make sure, because I ranged it before. I ranged how far it was from there and then how far it was to the tree that I wanted to get to and have a bit of a rough idea of the distances. So then I rushed out there on my knees, got there, quickly ranged this tree and knew it was 22 in my head, and then I was like, quick, cool, that's all I need to know. Everything is going to be roughly around 20 to 25, whatever happens here, if they don't piss bolt. Anyway.
What are your pins set to?
I have a single pin.
Yeah.
And it's set to 20.
Yeah, okay. Yards or meters?
Meters.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I'm a 90s baby. I'm killing meters, not yards.
Yeah, I go meters too. Don't worry.
I can't stand the yards thing, but whatever. Adam McCulloch. Anyway, so 22 meters, and I thought, yep, good. That's all I need to know. Rangy back in my pouch. I put my release on, and I was just sitting there on my feet, and I thought, I'm good. I'll just wait. And honestly, I was so done by this point. I had so many fails that every single approach on a deer, I wasn't even there was no adrenaline. There was no oh my God, this could be it. This is it. I'm like, righto, fuck, here we go.
Yeah.
This could work or it couldn't work, whatever's going to happen, we just play it step by step, see what happens. Anyway, I was just sitting there, and it was also how long do I sit here for? I'm probably going to have to get off my feet a million times, pins and needles, before anything even happens here. Anyway, it was pretty quick, straight up. I don't know what scared them, but they sort of rushed out a little bit, and then my stag stood up along with about 40 other deer that were bedded out there in the long grass that I didn't even know were there. And I thought, oh shit. And I thought, okay, this is it. He didn't move far, he just stood, and then he looked away, and I thought, righto, this is it. So I drew back while I was still sitting on my feet, and this is the first time I've ever actually shot an animal off my knees. I've practiced a couple of times off my knees, but you tend to not think about it, and you really should practice off your knees a bit more. Because you don't realise that that's the sort of situation that you end up in when you're actually hunting. So rose slowly up onto my knees, and yeah, like I explained it on my Instagram, probably a lot clearer than I could even say it, but it just becomes, for me, I don't get that adrenaline rush. I don't get heart thumping or anything like that. It just becomes extreme focus, and everything else around what I'm focusing on has no sound or it's not even in my vision. And so everything just starts to settle naturally. So like your hand falls on your face as you know it should feel, your strings on your nose, everything subconsciously you're looking at your level, everything feels right. It's like a step-by-step process from draw to anchor that is like tick, 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 tick.
Yep.
You're good. You're settled, you're good, you're breathing. And then I was just watching him, I think I had both my eyes open. I was just watching him because I wasn't ready yet, had my finger locked behind my release so nothing could blow up or anything. And then he settled from what he was distracted from and just casually looked forward. And I thought, right. And I just closed one eye and I was just already settled where I wanted to hit, which was pretty much the top of the grass.
Yep.
And then I just pulled through my shot. And looking back on the footage, I didn't realize, but shooting on my own, I've started to sort of trigger on my shot a little bit. Whereas when I turned up, it just wasn't as accurate as I'd hoped. And Brad was like, oh, you're not pulling through your shot, Em. Like, you're not push pulling. And I'm like, I am. And he's like, no, you're not. Like, he videoed me. And I can't encourage everyone enough to like video yourself or take photos of yourself when you're shooting, especially when you're on your own all the time, because you fall into habits without realizing. And until you start hunting with someone else and they start looking at it, that they go, yeah, you look retarded, So, and in the moment I just pulled through it, and you can see my arm come back and pull through, which I was like, oh, thank God.
Did it with style as well.
Yeah. And so I just did it, just all didn't even think about it. It just all happened really naturally. And I was just like, this is exactly the moment. I don't even have to think, oh, maybe he could come a couple of meters closer, or maybe I should wait till he feeds or whatever. It was just like, here's my moment to draw. And then it was like, here's my moment to shoot. And it was just like, boom, natural, no second thoughts. And then the shot was, when it went off, I was like, that was good. And like if you shoot, you know whether it's, you go, oh shit, I don't know, or you go, fuck yeah, that was bang on. And that was for me, I was like, fuck yeah, that felt good. And then he actually fought it a fair bit. Like he sort of turned, and then there was a fair few stags got up when the 40 deer got up. And I watched him, and he staggered and he was wobbling. And I was on my knees, and I just instantly put my binos up and was just sort of trying to stand up against my tree without spooking anyone. But the wind was actually had picked up by then, that everything was fairly settled and happy with all of the distraction. Like the trees were going on, the grass was in like waving in the wind and stuff like that. And he just sort of wobbled, and then he went down. And I was like, oh, my God, thank God. But I was still watching him, and I was like, please lay over. Like he was just down, but he wasn't completely over. And I was like, come on, for sure, come on. And then got back up, and I was like, oh, fuck. And then I was sick, and I was like, oh, my God, I'm the worst person in the world. I was like, oh, Emily, that's it, change jobs. And then, and then he went down again, but there were so many other stags that sort of swarmed him that were a bit of equal age and stuff. There was one that only had one antler, and he looked like he was going to come in and beat him up. I hadn't experienced that with deer before, but I've seen it with pigs, that if you shoot one, and dogs, they'll just come in and sort of brawl them.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of waiting for that to happen, but it didn't happen. And it must have been the stag must have walked in front or something, and he'd gone down. And I've actually confused him with another stag, and he's just kept walking off with all the other girls. And then I thought, like, oh, my God, he's gone down. He's come back up, and he's completely fine. I was like, what the hell have I done?
Oh,
like,
my God.
I haven't even injured him. Like, what the hell's just happened? And Oh my God, I tell you my emotions. And so then like Brad's just like crept up and walked up behind me and he's filming. He's like, what do you reckon? I was like, I don't even fucking know. And I'm already like prepared to be like, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't even know what's gone wrong or whatever. And I was like, he just seems fine. Like, he seems fine. Like, I swear the shot was good, whatever. He wobbled, he went down, and now he's like chasing girls around, like literally sniffing their ass and whatnot. And he was like, no, I'm pretty sure he didn't walk that off, Em. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I saw him go down. And I was like, oh my God, this height advantage, I tell you. And I was like, where? And he's like, oh, like 10 meters from where he first went down. And I was like, oh my God. And he's like, but, you know, I don't know. Like, I didn't, because when they all stood up, Brad wasn't really sure which one I was going to shoot. So it was all in quite of a wide frame type thing. And when I looked back at him, he was re-watching the footage, and that's a good sign.
No,
if Brad's re-watching the footage straight away, you're like, fuck, oh my God. Anyway, yeah, so we went up and got closer to that deadfall and jumped up, and I was still searching in my binoculars, and then he was like, yeah, it's there. And then I saw him in the grass, and oh, my heart was in my throat, mainly because I just wasn't sure, you know, because I hadn't convinced myself. Like, I thought initially I'd done a good shot, but it was just like after that, such a roller coaster that, yeah, I just needed to get my hands on him. And then when I got there, I had my arrow on because from experience, Brad said that he's seen plenty of times that even if you do a half good shot, sometimes they can still bounce up on adrenaline and just keep running.
Yeah.
So I had my arrow on. And
how long have you waited until this point? Like 10 minutes sort of thing, or if even?
No, not even that long. Probably like maybe 5, I think. But it was like we still stayed probably like 100 meters or like 170 meters or something like that back when I was glassing him, and he was fully laid over.
Yeah, cool.
If he was sort of like sitting up a little bit, it would be like, oh, hang on, let's just reapproach this. But he was fully laid over and approached really slow. I had an arrow on and just prepared for anything. But when we got there, it was very clear that he was lights out. So, yeah, that was it was incredible. And it was just like, you know, like for me, it was just in that moment, I was like, holy shit, like you spend so much effort and time and experiences with like a billion other deer up until this point, and it just happened so fast, you know, like, and the wind was so good that all the other deer that had just been in that scene were still there. Like, and that's the cool thing about the bow, is that it's so silent and everything happens so quick and silently that nothing else is affected. Yeah. It's like, oh, what happened to Jerry over there? Like, you just went down. Like, what? Oh, ratto. And then they just keep grazing and whatnot. Whereas if it's a gun, it's just like, wow, what the hell? And they run off.
Everything just goes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Whereas like we were still creeping around because we, you know, potential stalks for tomorrow for someone else. We didn't really want to blow it, but yeah, they were still hanging around, and yeah, it was just like, holy shit. Like, for me, it was like, oh man, like that whole thing that I'd set my heart on so heavy is just, there it is, you know? And I was like, wow, I don't know. It's such a mixed feeling of emotions. And I talked to a few people after it, like, and it took me a while, like, to even post about it. It took a while to set in, I think. And it, like, in the moment, like, I'm a fairly emotional person, but even in the moment, I didn't feel like crying. Like, I think I was just a bit in shock about the whole process of it, and that I was also like in awe, and then I was disappointed to start with that it was over and that I'd actually done it, and I was like, oh shit, like here it is. And then it's like, oh well, and do I really feel good about this? Not really. And then it's like, oh, actually, yeah, I put a lot of effort into this, and I had to do everything right for this to happen, and fuck yeah, I should be happy, you know. And then once everyone else is around you and it's just like, hell yeah, and you did it. Yep. I was like, I did do it, didn't I? And then you get excited and happy and whatnot. And yeah, I was pretty useless that night. But yeah, it was amazing. It's an incredible feeling. And I try to explain it to a lot of people that haven't done it, and it's almost impossible. Like, they appreciate it, but they also still mainly see the sad factor, I think, the most. But I spoke to a few people after it that, you know, can resonate with that feeling, and Grant Randy being probably the main one. He told his own story to me about a fallow deer that he put a lot of effort into getting to, and there was like this video. He sent me this video, and he was just like, "Oh, just so you know that it's pretty real for everyone, you know." And there was just this video of Rand, and he was just like almost shell shocked, you know, like he'd just worked his ass off, and like so many things leading up to this moment. He was just sitting there next to this deer, and he wasn't excited. He wasn't crying. He wasn't overly sad or anything, but he certainly wasn't excited or happy. And it's just this dumbfounded, numb feeling of like, oh, you know, like I did it. Like, but I'm so sad that I did it. You know, like it's weird. It's so
I think
weird.
obviously you build up a relationship with the animal, right? Like it's not just you're going out to kill an animal for a head on your wall or for some meat in the freezer. Like, yes, that's part of it, but there's so much more to it, and you really do develop an understanding, a caring, and a loving for these animals so much that when it does come together, I know exactly what you're saying. Like, it's such a hard thing to kind of actually explain. But I think you're doing a pretty good job of it.
I can only imagine how it must feel for someone that, you know, can target a particular animal, you know, like say they see a deer. I know that Brad had this experience with a Rusa stag that had particular, you know, unique characteristics and stuff, and he saw him over and over and over again, and the pursuit was for that one particular animal, multiple hunts. And it's just like you just keep chasing that one animal, and then when that's all over, I can only imagine that would be probably tenfold of what I experienced, because I only experienced the fact that I had hunted the same species, and I'd hunted hundreds of stags before this one, which is why I sort of explained in my post that I almost felt a little bit ripped off that the only moments that I shared with that animal was between when I saw it and initially that afternoon and when it was all over. Because I don't know, I know it would be even more sad, but it would be so much more, not meaningful, because it's always meaningful, but just like, I guess, tug at the heartstrings a lot more if it's just been that one particular animal that you've pursued. And that would just be such an incredible feeling that even again, you would really struggle to explain.
Yeah, definitely. No, it is interesting. I was just thinking that whole time, like imagine if it was an overseas trip, like the difference on that and the amount of weight you'd put on something like that if you're going overseas for a certain critter.
For sure.
Like, it would just be, it'd almost weigh on you like another 10 folds of the investment that you're putting into that. But within saying that, that's not trying to take away from anything that you've just said either. It's just what I was thinking about.
And everyone's on their own journey. Like, if you compare me to Danny, there is absolutely no difference in how we both felt in that moment. You know, like she was on a completely different journey to what I was on. Like, yes, mine might have taken 5 trips, hers only took the one, but it doesn't take away at all anything that either of us felt, because it's still the same process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and whether it's a rabbit or a deer or a pig or anything, you know, it's still a life, and it's something that you've been sought after, and that you go through that process to get done as humanely as you can. You know, like, it's pretty special. It's very hard to explain. And I struggle with this with my mum. Like, my mum's that generation that was brought up on Bambi. She had an audio book that she read Bambi, and someone spoke to the book at the same time and always said those words like, "Run, Bambi, man is in the forest." Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And she's always like had this, she's like Dr. Doolittle with animals. She has a connection with animals. It's retarded. Like, you'll see the birds fly down onto the branches, the cat follows her everywhere, all of the dogs are around her. Like, she speaks animal for sure. And so she's never quite understood how I can hunt. And I explained to, so that I caught up with her this weekend it's gone after this hunt, and I was explaining it to her from my core and with all of my emotions, and I cried while I was telling her all about it and stuff. And then so when I was crying, she was crying. She's like, I don't know, how can you do it if you're crying? And I'm like, I'm crying because I respect it.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, I'm not crying because I'm sad for the animal, Mum. I'm crying because it is such a whirlwind of emotions from the get-go, you know, from just feeling completely connected and experiencing that. And then
right down to the hours that you put in at home, just playing with your bow, taking shots, like all of that stuff that builds up as well. The emotional build up and the lead up to a hunt, like the what ifs and what will happens and whatever else. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, all of those almosts and things like that, and then that all just coming down to an end. But I just like always bring her back to that reality. Like, if I didn't do it, how would you think it would happen? You know, like in nature, how would this happen? You know, it's not going to be nice. It's going to be a lot worse. And at least, you know, here we are having venison for dinner, and it's pretty cool.
How'd she take it? Like, did she come around to it, or was she still?
Oh, she gets it. She totally gets it. She's like, the way she says, she goes, I'm so proud of you, and I'm so proud of your perspective on the world in such a holistic way, like that I've developed since becoming a bow hunter. And I guess I've always been a bit, I don't know, earthy and whatnot through agriculture and things like that. I have a much broader perspective than someone that maybe lives in the city and stuff. But especially since becoming a bow hunter, that you really, your eyes open to everything, and your senses are way more in tune to everything, and you understand just the circle of life a lot better, I think. And because she puts bacon on in the fry pan in the morning and has absolutely no connection to that animal, or even spares a thought as to where that's come from.
Yeah.
But she's also so happy that she doesn't, because she wouldn't be able to cope, and she'd 100% be a vegan if she had to. If she had to see the face of the animal that she had to eat, she wouldn't be able to do it. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people in the community that would have to do that. But my dad's great. My dad totally understands. He's like, I think it's great. I think it's so cool, because that's reality, and that's where we all stem from, and blah, blah, blah. Like, there is not one person alive on this earth that hasn't come from a hunter background.
100%.
You know?
I always shied away from showing a lot of the crew at the gym that I go to. Like, I'm there a lot, but shied away from showing them any of the stuff about bow hunting. And now that I'm actually starting to, they fucking love it. Like, they're crazy for it, because it's just, you show them so many cool experiences that they would never know to even be true. Like, I talk about deer, and they're like, there's deer near Brisbane? Like, what? And then I show them video footage of me standing like 20, 30 meters away from a deer, and they're like, holy hell, like, how does that happen? What do you do? Are they really aware? And they have no idea about the deer. But if you were just to say, I'm a hunter, they would previously would have said, oh, that's not cool, blah, 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 whatever, and have their perspectives on it. But when you approach it in that sense, and you're showing them the actual animal, and you're showing them the actual experience, and trying to like almost have them there with you in a sense, have them witness what you've witnessed, it becomes a completely different perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing though is that, like, I don't know, like, it just seems, I don't know whether it's just that I've moved around a fair bit and talked to a lot of different people these days, but it almost seems like the bow hunting community in Australia is actually growing.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of spearos that have started to get into it and stuff like that, and vice versa actually. And I don't know, like, I think the more people that understand it, the better. And the only way you're going to understand it is actually to get out there and do it, for sure. But I think that as long as you're doing it properly, you know what I mean? Like, as long as you're out there with a respect and an understanding, which you can only develop through experience as well. But Yeah.
I think, like you said before, having your own moral compass and using that when you're in the bush is really important.
Yeah.
And having things that you will and won't do. And so knowing what your shot distance actually is. Like if you're only practicing out to 20, 25 meters, you probably shouldn't be taking those 40-meter shots in the bush.
Absolutely.
And that's about, like you said, just putting that moral compass on and having it on at all points of time, even when you are full of adrenaline and there's a deer right there in front of you. I think that's when buck fever actually happens, is when people do things outside of their scope of capability. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And be proud of it,
Yeah,
like
100%.
be proud. And I'm lucky to have fallen into the hands of people that have been very experienced in hunting and things like that have only ever encouraged me to be proud of a drawdown.
Yeah.
Like to watch an animal walk has, like for me, felt like I have held so much more respect than if I had have just tried. Like if you can try and you're going to feel pretty shit if that doesn't go the way you wanted to. And if you don't feel shit about that, then, you should probably put the bow down because you're going to reflect badly on the community pretty much. But, definitely like feel proud and respect your limits that you hold for yourself, like if something's going to walk away, and even if it's a shot that you can still take, but it's not the ideal shot that you had in your head, let it go. Let it go until you get to that moment where you don't even have to think and it just happens. Because it does. As much as someone who's learning or someone who's had a bazillion attempts and still hasn't felt like it's come together, I guarantee you that it really does happen.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's actually a Brad Smith saying, it's the you're only as good as the shot you don't take.
Absolutely.
Which I think is so true. And with that being said, I think that is actually a perfect place to wrap this up. So, Em, thank you so much for coming on again. It's been really delightful to listen to your stories, as always. You were a lot less shy, a lot less nervous this time.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I've actually grown a lot as a hunter since last time, so I have a bit of something to fall back on.
A bit more confidence as well, hey?
Yeah.
So for those listening, you can reach Em. It's at M Corbett, CORBETT93 on Instagram. Anywhere else for people to reach out, Em, or that's the best place?
Nah, that's the best place. Thanks for having me, Matty. It's been awesome.
You're so welcome. All right, talk soon, mate.
All right, see ya.
That wraps up this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining us, team. If you did have any topics, questions, or you wanted to suggest a guest for Becoming a Bowhunter, you can send me an email at matty@becomingabowhunter.com. If you're enjoying the show or you've enjoyed in particular episodes, please do me a solid and share it around with your friends. If you are not already, please hit the subscribe button, as the more subscribers we get, the higher the podcast gets ranked, and that definitely helps out for showing it to other individuals. If you are not already following me on Instagram, it's at becomingabowhunter.podcast, and on YouTube, it's Becoming a Bowhunter. Get out, team, fling some arrows, get that practice in, and walk those yards in the paddocks until you find those critters. That is it for now, but not the last time that you'll hear from Becoming a Bowhunter.